Hello. So I'm still playing around with some changes to Breya. I still have that last slot that's been everything from Monastery Mentor to Fire Ice to currently Palace Jailer. With the Jailer, I was thinking I didn't need it because of Throne of High City, and maybe I don't. But it is a pretty crazy card as far as the tempo swing that it has on the game, being human, the fact that it's good against control and aggro and combo, like is good against everyone because it's card drawing, if nothing else. And not great against aggro necessarily, but usually solid. Also, the other thing about Jailer is that it comes down usually right about the same time your opponent's deploying their commander. So they bring out their commander, you bring out your Jailer, their commander goes to the exile zone, and you start drawing extra cards. It's pretty good. But if you've noticed, you may catch on that there is a card from the new set that I completely overlooked. And Brian pointed it out to me, and that card is Dovin Grand Arbiter. And this card is very interesting, and you're going to actually get to see it in action here in just a moment. And so what this card does is it, for Breya, potentially, is that it does offer a very small source of life, which is occasionally useful. It offers 1/1 artifact flying creatures, which is always useful. Also, these are colorless, unlike the Breya tokens, which are blue. So that means that these can block things that have like sort of fire and ice on them, for example. And then the ultimate, which you can ultimate pretty quickly, is completely ridiculous. So you can ultimate it somewhere around turn 5 or 6 in a typical game, right? So like if you play this on turn 3, you're generally going to make a flyer. Turn 4, you play Breya, and you plus this, perhaps, or maybe you minus it, make a second flyer, so you've got Breya and a bunch of flyers. The next turn, you plus it and hit with your 5 guys and tick this thing up to 7, and then on turn 6, you can ultimate. Or you can, tweak it from there. But so generally somewhere around turn 6 or so. But if you look at the top 3 cards of your game and put 3 of your choice into your hand, you basically win the game. So the ultimate you can get to pretty quickly, and it does act as a game winner. So all around, I would rate this card as pretty good, and maybe I'll get even more excited about it over time. But for now, the main thing about it is that it's just one of those cards that it works really well with the commander. It protects itself. It makes 1/1s for Clamp. It makes artifact creatures for Duretti. It kind of just does a lot, or Karn. It does a lot. So we're going to take a look here. We're going to see what happens. And I think in this game, some of these games, Palace Jailer was like, I don't know, Armageddon or something. It doesn't matter. It never comes up. So let's take a look at these games real quick here. All right. So I only had a few games here, and the Dovin is going to come up in the last few. But I'm going to run through all of them just for your enjoyment here. All right, so let's take a look here. So the first game I've got is against Nath of the Gilt Leaf. Not G-U-I-L-T, but I've got a very, very strong turn. So I'm going to lead off with fetching a crypt, and I go from 1 land to having 2, 4, so I have 12 mana in play. My opponent kills 2 of it, leaving me with only 8 active and 4 and 12 possible. I had, I guess, 10 plus 3, so 13. They drop me down to 8. And I actually throw away Badlands and a Thran Dynamo here for a Dak Faden, and my opponent makes an inexplicable play of Bontu's Monument into that board, which I cannot fathom what they were thinking playing this legendary artifact that would make Breya cost less. But sure, with a Dak Faden active on the board as the whole use of their turn. And I think they realized that they messed up a little bit there, because as soon as I take it with Dak Faden, my opponent concedes. But that was just one of those super awesome starts that Breya is just so enjoyable to pull off. Anyway, so Benevolent Star here. That's who I'm facing in round 2. And I do have a Dovin. Unfortunately, he's not really going to come into play in this game, and you'll notice why. My mana was really clunky and slow to get going, but I thought it would be okay because I thought that I would have time. But with my opponent's Soul Ring, now I suddenly don't feel like I do. My opponent's playing Marin and has a Burnished Heart, so I clone their Soul Ring with Vampiric ready to go, hoping my opponent doesn't sack the Burnished Heart here, actually. And they don't. They cultivate for a tapped land and an untapped land, which means... So I vamp. I'm going to go get Dak Faden. But my opponent has exactly 4 cards in hand, so the first thing I'm going to do is take all the cards out of their hand except for either they can try to protect one with top or they can play Marin. But at least I've got that dealt with. Heart is off the table now, which means I can Dak Faden here. So first thing I'm going to do is fabricate for a Mox Opal, and then I'm going to run out Dak Faden and steal their Soul Ring. So this puts them in exactly enough mana to activate Mayo. Oh, it was Mayo, the Anima. Did I say Marin? I said Marin. It's Mayo, the Anima. So this thing is clearly a threat. My opponent's deck is pretty much operating under the assumption that it's always going to have access to this card, I think, because just looking at the size of the things that we're hitting over here, and my opponent cheats an Elder Scale Worm into play. So Worm... if their life total is less than 7, it becomes 7 when it enters the battlefield, and damage will not reduce their life to less than 7. Life loss will, damage won't. A bit like it's a bit like a worship. When you have a creature out, keeps you at 1. This thing keeps you at 7. Not counting life loss. So this is 7/7 Trampler. That part threatens Dak Faden, but otherwise this is not a very threatening hit from my opponent at all. Of course, with top going, this Mayo, the Anima. Anyway, my opponent's commander is much more threatening. Opponent, again, very confusing what my opponents are doing in the face of Dak Faden. The first player made a pretty bad mistake giving me a target, and the second player now attacking Dak Faden with a Trampler after playing Wormcoil. So I don't force that. I'm going to go ahead and sack Opal and Talisman. Unfortunately, it means no Dovin for a while, but the reason why I did that was because Soul Ring is just too much mana, and I'm not going to get rid of it. So now I get to Skull Clamp Wormcoil, and if I sacrifice the Wormcoil, I get to draw cards and then make creatures who I can then clamp and sack to draw even more cards. So I have no blue mana at all. I haven't drawn a single blue land this entire game, as a matter of fact. Right, so my turn, I top deck a Talisman here, which is nice. I want to get some damage first and gain some life before I do the sacrifice play, but now I'm going to go ahead and sack, kill the Mayo, and I have to sack an artifact there. Find myself a Mana Crypt, and opponent tops in response, which is pretty sad, because I'm now going to activate Winter Orb and tap them completely down and the game ends. And I never drew a blue mana source, or a white one for that matter, other than artifact. Like, I never drew an actual blue land the entire game. So unfortunately, Dovin just sat there stranded, looking at Skull Clamp, eagerly wishing to come into play and feed me 2 cards per turn, but there was nothing I could do there with that. So I didn't get to test it out, but I did have a fun game. Next was the Denial, and this opponent is playing a Trotta. So we'll see how quickly they're able to trot this out into play. But meanwhile, I've got a pretty good start. The only thing is, again, a little tight on the mana here. Got really missing land tax these days. Opponent vamps, and I figured they might be getting like Wasteland or something. But unknown what they got. I do have Force Will if it wasn't a land. All right, so this turn I will have to go get some more mana, so I do. Crypt and pass. Opponent goes for Crypt. Now, I might force that under other conditions, but my situation's pretty fragile, and if they had a big play, I could force that. Meanwhile, I have a solution to that card in my hand. So I'm going to run this out with exactly one. I'm going to pause. So I played this with 1 mana floating and an untapped relic, which gave me the option if my opponent played a counter or some kind of instant, I could have remanded the ready back to my hand if they tried to counter it and got card advantage, or I could have remanded the card they played back to their hand and gone for tempo advantage just to, kill the Mana Crypt. So I think I probably would have ended up remanding Duretti because I have the Force of Will. But fortunately, I didn't have to bother, so I get to kill the Mana Vault and trade it for Mana Crypt. Opponent spends some life and plays a Metamorph. A little confusing on what they're doing there. Another opponent, this is what, the third one in a row, who seems to be kind of unresponsive to the Planeswalkers that I have in play. I'm not quite sure what they're thinking or doing when they're making some of these plays. It's a bit confusing, but anyway, my opponent, I guess, realizes what's going on and then concedes. Maybe they were thinking they could get me to sack one of my other cards, and I don't think that makes a lot of sense since I had 1-2 and a Coalition Relic 3-4. I had the mana to play my commander regardless. Or maybe they just forgot about my commander. It's kind of hard to say there. I mean, you just never know what's going on. Person could have been distracted, or who knows. At any rate, fairly straightforward win, even though I had a really tough mana situation, a little rocky in the beginning. But I say straightforward because I had Force Soul from start to finish and never had to play it, so that's a sign that I wasn't pushed too hard. So anyway, here I've got Omnath I'm facing, and this hand's not too bad. So I decided I'm going to take a... I don't really like tutoring for this card here necessarily, but I like the idea that it gives me a lot of mana for Mind Twist. Opponent plays Somber Walled Sage. So I'm going to go ahead and actually twist for one less than the number of cards in their hand. I get a Cloud Thresher, some lands, and I miss whatever else is left. So there's Omnath is down, and I've got a Shackles early, so I'm going to go ahead and Factor Fiction. My opponent's trying to figure out how to split these cards up and ends up doing this. So I take Feast and Famine, Tithes, Empiric, and I let a Deluge and a Cryptic go. Steal their bird and pass. Now, because this is a little weird, but Somber Walled makes a ton of sense in Omnath. So the reason it makes so much sense is that it adds 3 mana of a color only used to cast creatures, but Omnath doesn't care what the green mana can only be used for. As you can see, it's a 9/9 regardless of the fact that 3 of it's only for creatures. So this thing's like tapped to triple pump Omnath. Seems pretty great to me. So I like it in there. Where I normally think that card is awful, I actually appreciate what my opponent's doing here. So anyway, I'm going to equip my bird and attack, take a card out of their hand, get my mana back, play Seal of Cleansing, Teferi, tuck their Omnath, and pass. Opponent has not given up yet, which is interesting. So they run out Omnath and pump and pass. So I go ahead and grab just a land, play Breya, tapped land, attack, take another card out of my opponent's hand, and I'm going to go ahead and, this is funny because, so I'm sacking Breya and a Thopter, replaying Breya the same turn that I played. It's a second Breya, 2 Thopters, or a Thopter and a Breya, kill their guy, and pass. And my opponent finally realizes what's going on. Like, I have so much insane amounts of mana with the Sword and the Workshop interaction and Breya, along with the Thran Dynamo. So I played, what was that, 4 for Breya, 2 to sack it, that's 6. And then 6 more for Breya is 12, 2 to sack it is 14 with a mana floating at the end of that turn. Spent 14 mana. It's a pretty good turn. Anyway, opponent gives up. Funny enough, Teferi was going to untap 2 lands, and I could have spent 2 more if I had something to spend it on. So kind of cool stuff there. Luda is my next opponent, and is this person a merfolk? No, they're a Queen Marchesa, and I've got a hand that's a little clunky, but it's got early defenses and it has Dak Faden, so, you know, those are good things. Here I draw Brainstorm. I think I deployed this a little too early because I'm probably going to leak here, and I don't want to. I want to do Brainstorm Fetchland, not cast Mana Leak, so I should have used just a Scrub Land there, but it works out for me because my opponent doesn't have anything that I'm willing to target with the Mana Leak. So with that Burnished Heart there, I'm going to go ahead and just snag it. I can use these cards to follow up afterwards. My opponent plays Queen Marchesa. They become the Monarch, but then on my, so they're going to draw a card, but then on my turn, I can most likely, I can attempt to find a solution with Preordain, but if not, then I can Demonic Tutor, probably plow that thing, attack with the Burnished Heart, become the Monarch back, and then from there I can start drawing 2 cards per turn. forcing my opponent to have to struggle to get their Marchesa back in play. And I think my opponent, I don't know, just decides to give up, probably because, I mean, I'm not sure, but if they were missing a land drop, then that would probably indicate a scoop right there. And that could have been the reason why they conceded. Okay, I'm playing against Daniel again with a very difficult mana situation, except I've got the mana vault into Relic, and my opponent just scoops. So he's going to charge, obviously, and then next turn I get to throw down Confidant, and then probably just charge again, and then start drawing 2 cards per turn and use the Mystic to go get other disruption. I guess my opponent didn't enjoy the first one and didn't want to play the second one. I don't know. And then finally, Andy Light Guy here provided me with a game where I got to deploy Dovin Bond. Or no, not Bond. Dovin. This is the problem with all these same names. What is he? Dovin Grand Arbiter. DGA. So I get to deploy the DGA this time. So in this game, I try something. I mention it in the comments, and I'll point out to you when I mention it. Because I wasn't sure how it would interact. I didn't take the time to think it out, and I figured I could recover regardless. So I'll show you what's I'll show you what's going to happen, where I kind of test it rather than sort of like, thinking it through. And you'll see it does end up making the game much harder than I expected it to be. So I go ahead and I had 2 lands on top. I take 1 so that I can hit land drops for the next couple of turns, and then of course I find a 3rd land in a row, which is a bit much, but it'll be fine. So for now, everything's playing out normally. I'm going to run out Stoneforge Mystic. My opponent's playing. My opponent went to Jared here, playing Golgari Lichlord. Hits an Oracle and does not have a land on top, and then does not have a land on top again, which is really, really nice. Plays a Lord of Extinction. I remand it, and there's Dovin. There's DGA over there. All right, so I decide on this turn I'm going to play him because I want to get Weathered Wayfarer on board, and this way my opponent really can't swing in. I know they're going to play their 6/6 again, but they're down to 4 cards in hand, so this is a great opportunity for me to kind of work out exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to ponder beforehand. I decided to shuffle, find a Mox Opal, which is fine, and then go for a hand. But first I'm going to equip, take a card out of their hand, and then send the Mind Twist. And here, okay, pause. Okay. So here I pay, this is a 10/10, and I pay 10, and I'm curious to see exactly what's going to happen. Well, all the creatures go to the graveyard at the same time. So the Oracle, the Wayfarer, the Stoneforge, and the spell itself, the Toxic Deluge. So that's 4 cards that go to the graveyard at the same time. So the Lord of Extinction, who was a 10/10, simultaneously gets -10/-10 and +4/+4 because of the 4 cards dying all at once. It kind of all happens together. So what ends up happening is the Lord of Extinction finishes the turn as a 4/4. And then, of course, when the Deluge effect wears off, it becomes a 16/16. So not 11 with a 16/16. And all I have is this lowly Dovin DGA blocker here. So I'm going to have to... And my opponent runs out their Jared. I go ahead and tutor for a plow and get rid of the 16/16. Play a emergency Thopter, and my opponent has Deed on 0. Smashes me to 4. So I'm going to have to tutor here for something that's going to get me out of this. And my best choice here at this point, I think, is Yogg Will. So I will, for an Opal, which I can't use yet, plow that thing right away. And then play Dovin, make a flyer, which gives me exactly 1 life and turns on the Mox Opal, which allows me to play a fetch land, since those are the only lands I have, taking me back down to 1. But because I have both 1 life and active Opal off of this Dovin, I actually can now use the scrub land and the Mox Opal that I otherwise would not be able to. And I play Stoneforge, and I go get Umezawa's Jitte so I can get back into this game. Opponent plays Birthing Pod, which I did not want to see. I equip Thopter. I make a mistake here as well. So I play Breya. This is just a screw up. Plus up Dovin, so he'll get 2 more counters here from tapping my opponent. Jumps him up to 5. Untap all my mana here, thinking I'm probably fine, but what I needed to do, I'm going to pause again. What I needed to do is not play Breya there. I needed to play Jitte and equip off the same 4 mana so that I would have life, so that I could use the Tomb, which would allow me to Mystical Teachings in response to anything my opponent does and either mana drain or disenchant the pod. But as it turns out, I went for Breya thinking, oh, it's more mana efficient, when it wasn't. This is the same 4 mana. Only now I don't have an active Jitte and I don't have a way to gain life that doesn't cost me mana. So if I spend 2 mana to gain some life, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I'm 1 short of disenchant or mana drain at that point. So that pod is now a threat to me that I can't deal with this turn, and my opponent has Demonic Tutor off the top into Reanimate out Protein Hulk. It's so bad. Now, if my opponent tries to... I'm going to pause again. If my opponent tries to combo me off here, it's possible that I could interrupt the combo with multiple activations from Breya, one or more activations, either gaining life or shrinking creatures. So if they try to like do some kind of karmic guide nonsense. So I think for that reason, my opponent just fetches Kokusho thinking that they're going to, I'm at 1, so all they need to do is sack it to Birthing Pod or something like that, and then they can win. Of course, I can gain 8 life here or 10 life. Yeah, it's 5 per activation. So I could gain 5 life here if this goes and gets a 7-drop that can possibly kill me. So we'll see what it fetches. Woodfall Primus. So he's going to kill my sword. So in response, I'm going to gain some life because I'm in big trouble if I don't, right? Sacking the sword and the creature that it was equipped to. And at the end of my opponent's turn, I probably should have sacked the other Thopter because it's better to have a colorless creature, but it's fine. I go ahead and get Enlightened Tutor and then use this opportunity to treachery the Kokushos so that I don't just die to it. Now I play my Jitte and equip it, and I also plus up Dovin. So now with 2 hits, it's going to get 2 more counters. It's going to go to 8, which means I can ultimate. The ultimate is 7, and it'll still live next turn. So I just need there to be a next turn. So I go ahead and play Crucible here and replay a land and pass, mainly because I have enough life to activate Breya if I need to. My opponent sacks Woodfall Primus, persists, targeting the Treachery. So I shrink it once with Jitte and then sack the 2 Thopters to kill it and gain 5 life off of the triggered ability and not give it back to my opponent. And my opponent does not have a 9-drop to fetch, which is really, really good for me. Instead plays a Deathrite Shaman and passes. And that is all she wrote. Dovin gets the ultimate, and I take Cryptic Jace, Seal of Cleansing. At which point I can go seal away the pod, which was the big threat. Jace away the Woodfall Primus. Equip Jitte. Smash. Kill your creature. That Ancient Tomb is a swamp, by the way, because I play the Urborg this time, so that way if I need to activate Breya, I won't be taking damage. And pass. And that's it. Opponent draws, cycles, looking for something. I don't know what they could have here, except maybe Living Death. And if they had Living Death, it'd be pretty bad. That's what it would be. But, they'd get Oracle, Sakura. Viscera Seer would be a problem because they'd also pick up Protein Hulk and Kokusho. So if they had Living Death, it'd be pretty bad because my instinct would be to respond by shrinking both of these creatures, allowing Breya to die, and then they would jump back out. I'd get Breya, a Stoneforge to go get Clamp, Weathered Wayfarer. But it'd be pretty gnarly. That's like probably the worst thing that could happen. And I might just lose on the spot. Fortunately, nothing like that happens, and I get a win. And you get to see Dovin, Grand Arbiter, DGA here do some work. I thought that was pretty neat because on that turn where I gained the life and the creature, the fact that it was 1 life and an artifact creature, both mattered. I needed exactly both things to happen that turn. It was very important to go from 1 to 2 and very important to go from 2 artifacts to 3 with the Mox Opal out. So fun stuff, good times, and very powerful card here. So this is currently kind of the mentor replacement because this can very quickly get to its ultimate and win a game, and always get you a card or a creature mentor. You play it, and then you have to wait if you're top decking. Whereas this guy at least gives you a creature, and then from there you can start doing things. But hopefully you enjoyed that. There'll be more games to come, I'm sure. I'm looking forward to actually playing more and having some more fun with this, and trying to figure out the last bit. I'll be honest, the card that this is supposed to be, that this wants to be, needs to be, is Balance, but unfortunately still banned, even though I don't think it should be, because it is one of the, if you look at, here's my argument, Black has Mind Twist, or if you want to do as recovery cards, Black has Yawgmoth Will to recover from, like you saw in that game. Red has Wheel of Fortune. Blue has Time Twister. Green has Sylvan Library, or any of the X spells that recover, but I'm looking at like 3, cheaper cards, right? And then white has absolutely nothing. Balance is the card that it's supposed to have, but oh well. Anyway, it's a strange thing, but it is what it is. Hopefully you enjoyed the games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.